Hello, my name is Matthew Marvin. I also go by the Poker Gypsy. Welcome back to Justice Junkeez. We appreciate all you guys' support so far. Keep it coming. Today, got Mr. 702 Problem Solver, Mr. David Kohlmeier. Welcome back, sir. It is a pleasure.
702 Problem Solver in the house. How are you, buddy?
Any other accolades? Because I know you're doing a lot. Anything else you want to mention that you've got going on these days?
You know, I actually the Problem Solver has been going on for actually 2 years at Sticky Pod Studios over here, which is a great place if anyone's doing podcasting these days.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate. It's crazy, 2 years, and the goal is just to keep on being consistent, getting the message out there. I'm trying to help people as the problem solver, and now that with the Justice Junkeez, I get to maybe share some wisdom and thoughts. As a retired police officer. Person for being in Vegas for 21 years, grew up in New York City. So my goal is, just to share, my wisdom and my experience and basically try to help people, throughout the U.S., throughout the world.
Okay. So first question, I got a problem that I need solved. I can't, something happened, I don't understand it. The Cowboys beat the Giants 4-0. What the fuck happened?
It's funny when you bring up sports because honestly, I'm clueless about sports. My dad never really watched sports. Yeah. So I am clueless when it comes to sports. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing,
I don't think nobody can solve that question anyway. So
but there's okay. always going to be a problem with all these teams, Cowboys and.
All right. So the first question I got, technically the second question now, why did you become a police officer? What made you go to do police work?
I'm 47 years of age right now. Came out to Vegas 21 years ago, but originally I grew up in New York City and I wanted to, make a difference. My mother used to say I used to like to argue a lot, and she said I should become an attorney. Yeah. But I felt like being an attorney was going to be just kind of boring inside an office and not going to be fun. And I really wanted to, make a difference within the community, within planet Earth. Just to affect lives and maybe make some change. Okay. So I felt. I'm Jewish, and there's a Jewish word called a mitzvah. A mitzvah basically means like doing a good deed. Mm-hmm. It's a Jewish word, Yiddish. And the whole point was you could do mitzvahs by doing different things, right? I mean, you could do something nice to somebody, you can give money for charity. And I felt like by doing mitzvahs, doing good deeds on a daily basis was just kind of like my calling and would feel good in general. Yeah. So at the age of 22, I became a New York City police officer. And at the end, I wound up doing 17 years in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. It was definitely a great experience from New York to Vegas. Definitely, crazy stories, interesting experiences. But the truth is, I'm glad to be alive and not even have, whether it's PTSD or, even, police officers actually deal with a lot of different issues. And whether it's from their family life or their schedule, their shift, coworkers, administration, from the public, there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. And, there's several officers that I know that have passed away, whether it's from, work or even off-duty items that deal with a lot of stress. So, I'm lucky to be alive. I've got 3 kids. I'm married to a beautiful wife. Yeah. So I am fortunate, but I did start when I was 22. Yeah. I'm 47 now, and I'm fortunate to be retired the last 8 years from policing, but I basically work in the capacity of a law firm, and I'm working like as a case manager, intake, someone that's solving problems, but of course I'm not an attorney and not giving specific legal advice, but as a cop for 17 years, right, when you called 911, I would show up. Right. I was giving legal advice as a police officer, giving referral resources. I was advising people what to do. And then, if someone committed a bad deed, they would go to jail and they would be arrested. But for the most part, I really was solving problems as a police officer for 17 years, which is very much embedded into New York City police officers, really to solve the problem and not to always arrest people, which is, kind of the sad thing these days is police officers are just known for arresting people, or society thinks that we're beating people, or there's corruption that takes place. And I always say that in police work or any job, whether you work for UPS or FedEx, there's going to be some bad apples, out there. And sometimes the job itself affects people. Sometimes different vices or different things that happen to people affect police officers just like it would affect anybody else, just like a teacher. Right? People can change at any time depending upon what's going on in their life, and it can change people. So, like I said, I'm very fortunate to be alive, healthy, and trying to help people still, by working in law firms and being the problem solver. People do call me all the time and say, Dave, I got a problem. What do you think? And people private message me, they text me, they call me. And I'm just trying to basically just do kind of God's work in regards to, giving my opinion, advice, and suggestions to help people get through a difficult time.
Yeah. Okay. So today is September 12th. I wanted to get you on yesterday for September 11th, but we were both busy. Being from New York, how did September 11th affect your life, or did it at all?
You know, it's interesting. So I was a police officer at the time. So I was NYPD in Brooklyn, in Brownsville, East New York, the 7th Precinct. And I was there for 3 years. And then what happened was I was looking for a better job. So I took all these different police exams, whether it's from Connecticut, New York State Trooper. I took Henderson Police, Las Vegas Metro. I took 13 police exams. And I always say by choice, meaning that it wasn't like I was pushed out. I was basically looking for that better job, you know, more money, maybe no state tax, no city tax where you live, you know, better cost of living, newer home. You know, I was looking for that basically American dream job as a police officer.
Yeah.
And New York City as a police officer, you started out, you know, 20 something years ago at $29,000 a year,
Yeah.
which after taxes and pension payments, you were literally taking home $600 like every 2 weeks. You look at your paycheck
Jesus.
and like, what is going on?
Risking
Like, you
your
know?
life every day.
So,
Jesus.
but you know, it definitely looking back, right? Being a New Yorker, you know, becoming a New York City police officer, I have no, you know, no family that were police officers. It's very much traditional with them. A lot of Irish or Italian families happen to be Jewish.
Yeah.
No one in my family was a police officer. So, basically, after 3 years on NYPD, I took a job with MTA Police. MTA Police is, and if you've been to New York, there's Penn Station, there's Grand Central Terminal, these railroad terminals in New York City. And actually, the lines go up to Connecticut or it goes up to Long Island. So I actually became a New York State police officer. I was there for 9 months. During 9/11, I actually was an MTA police officer, which was New York State Police, but I basically worked the railroad line, and basically I was state police. And with that, I was working 9/11 in Brooklyn. It just happened to be that day I was in Brooklyn, and I was working across from the towers, across from the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was a weird situation that day because with my assignment, I could have been sent kind of anywhere, and it just happened to be like I went back to Brooklyn, which was rare. I could have worked in Manhattan, I could have worked in Queens, I could have worked different places that day. And I actually was stationed in Queens, which is one of the 5 boroughs.
Yeah.
So for me to actually be in Brooklyn, I was told to go down to this particular stop. You know, was you know, like I said, right across the bridge from the Brooklyn Bridge from Manhattan, from the towers. And because we heard there was a small plane, like about 8:23 in the morning, that hit the tower, so we went down there. But we thought it was just an accident.
Yeah.
We didn't think anything of terrorist related because, you know, it's never really kind of happened before with the plane.
Yeah.
So we go down there, and then once the plane hit, again, most people didn't know communication wasn't great. But then when a second plane hit, like something was going on.
Yeah.
And then so I was working, and at that point in time, you know, I always say that the movie Die Hard, the Die Hard movie with the Nakatomi building when there was an explosion. I always say even from the distance of where I was in Brooklyn, like it felt a little fake. Like it didn't, like when I saw it, you're like, oh shit, like, oh my God, that's not good, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't directly under the tower, like that you were like really, really feeling like, oh my God, like you're running for your life. I was looking at like it was a very picturesque, you know, scene of the water and the bridge, right? Like it was still far, even though I was right across the bridge from it, you know? So people at the end when the towers went down, or actually when the plane hit, people were crossing over the bridge coming to the Brooklyn station. And at the station they were leaving, they were going out to Long Island, they were going to Queens. They basically were escaping the city. Most people were like, they basically going to work.
Yeah.
But long story short, it didn't feel like real to me until people started coming over the bridge and people had the soot on them, you know, from the building or from the debris. When the towers came down, we were like, oh my God, right? But like, for some reason, again, I wasn't directly under it. So like, and being a cop, you're more desensitized. Like if I saw like a body in the room deceased, like it doesn't even look real anymore. Like it didn't affect me because I was desensitized from seeing so much stuff as a police officer. So anyway, long story short, definitely sad situation. People were, you know, very upset, crying, devastated. I was looking at people's pants to see where the soot level, you know, where there was dirt and debris. Yeah. And I would ask them, hey, were you at the towers? They'd say, yeah, I was on the 6th floor. I was on the 10th floor, the 12th floor. So they would tell me where they were or where they were coming from. So one interesting story, which is kind of interesting because I know you're very interesting in regards to police work. That day when I worked at this train terminal, we were told by the fire department that where we were located, there was like a tower. There was like a time clock tower, and it's one of the highest buildings in Brooklyn. So one of the fire department, when they came to me, they said, look, this may be a target. Like, just be careful. So like, I'm like, oh my, like, what do we do, right? Like, this is my post, right? I'm trying to make sure people get out of the city and still create law and order while this is taking place.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like, wow, this may be hit. Like, what do we do?
Right.
So I said, let's go down into the terminal to the police station, see if there's any type of emergency equipment. So I remember we went down there, but I didn't have a key to get into this emergency equipment. So by the time you try to get someone to get a key or something, right, like something can take place.
Yeah.
So I decided, and I'm still new with this MTA police. I'm only there now, June, July, August. I'm there maybe 3-4 months.
Yeah.
I decided to take my asp out, which is the metal, like baton,
Yeah.
and I start beating the door, trying to break in because we're trying to kick it, we couldn't get in. We finally get in. I break the door open, and there's like an air horn, like a speakerphone. There's some, flashlights. But so he's trying to see what's working.
Yeah.
So the flashlights weren't working. The batteries weren't working. A lot of things weren't working. Because like most people, right, they probably weren't checking on it. There was no
Right.
system. They probably didn't think they ever needed it. Long story short, I remember I got an air horn, like a PA system, and we made sure that one of the batteries worked, and we got some equipment together just in case we needed it. We went upstairs, and then we basically started telling people, hey, train's going eastbound, get on the train, like there's no fee.
Yeah.
Go eastbound. If you basically I'm saying if you want to escape the city,
Right.
get on the train.
So it's like you was trying to move people, but you couldn't tell them why, because you didn't want to spread panic.
Well, first also, we really fully didn't know.
really know.
We thought like it was a small plane.
Yeah. Huh.
So I was just helping people at that time escape the city.
Right.
And with that basically being said, like I said, I was down there. What I wanted to share with you was interesting. So later on, like when 9/11, like a few days later,
Yeah.
I had to write a report of why I broke that door down. And I was told that I was probably going to be disciplined for breaking the door down. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is like
Right.
a terrorist attack. And that's the problem with the politics with the police department. It's like,
Yeah.
I understand I have to document why I damaged the door, but they were talking about like I was going to be disciplined for breaking that door down to get to the equipment. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
There was a terrorist attack. I'm trying to find the equipment. There's no key. How the hell am I supposed to get through this door to get emergency equipment? That's my, station. I'm like responsible for the people.
Right.
But I remember that I was actually a little bit concerned and worried that I was going to get disciplined. Like, I'm lucky I'm alive, first of all.
Yeah.
Now they want to write me up and be disciplined because I broke down the door during 9/11. And I still probably have the report somewhere. I always found that interesting because there's a lot of politics, and
Yeah.
the video that you posted the other day about cops working somewhere, a lot of times the administration can come down, which is the higher level ranking, officers
Yeah.
that are basically sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. And sometimes, people don't like you. Could be race, could be religion. No one's going to really tell you. It could be, I don't like the way that you speak, or
Right.
where you're from, or who knows what it is. And it's like wherever you are, right? Sometimes there's the boys club, a girls club, and I always just remember that issue during 9/11 that I was nervous later on. Like, I'm lucky I'm alive, but I'm worried about the actual being disciplined for breaking down the door to get
Yeah.
emergency equipment. So anyway, I survived the event. I did go down a few days later with railroad equipment, lighting equipment, basically to help ground zero. I didn't have a mask when I went down there. Like, we didn't really have masks.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was only down there for a few hours. So I am not one of the officers that have gotten sick and so on, because a lot of people have died, even working down there
Right.
at ground zero. And I remember some cops on their off days would go back and start working down at ground zero, and because it's evidence, right? They could be someone's finger,
Yeah.
they could be a badge, they could be a gun, there could be money, and they were putting it into buckets, and they would, like a bucket brigade, they would call it. So I was only down there for a few hours. Fortunately, even though to this day I feel bad that I didn't go down and do more there. I mean, it was just really a crime scene.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was saving lives. I did work 9/11. I was in a different capacity.
Yeah.
But I feel bad that I didn't go back to do the bucket brigade. But the truth is, a lot of cops died, cancer, breathing issues.
Yeah.
Some of the cops I know, they've messaged me, hey, I retired from this, from that. I got sick, breathing problems, different things. So the truth is, knock on wood, that even I was down there just for a few hours, all that stuff, that dust, the debris that, was cancerous.
Yeah.
And I went down there 3 days later, even though I was across the bridge. I'm sure I was affected to some degree, but, it didn't affect me at this point.
Could have been way worse.
So it could have been worse. But yeah, I will say, by coming out from New York City after 9/11, it was September.
Yeah.
I came out to Vegas in February.
Yeah.
So, I always felt good that I was a New Yorker. I worked 9/11.
Yeah.
I was a cop in New York City. There was
Yeah.
another cop I used to work with. He came out before 9/11.
Yeah.
So I would feel bad, like, if I wasn't in New York as a New York City cop.
Yeah.
So there's something very meaningful that I was at least there and that I did work that day.
Yeah.
Anyway, crazy day. The truth is that something's bound to happen in the future again.
Yeah.
And we have to be prepared. The question is, are we prepared?
Yeah.
Right? Because the bottom line is that they waited many, many years to do this terrorist attack years ago. What was 1989 or 86, basically, when they did a van, inside the towers. So
Yeah.
the problem is they'll wait 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So it does scare me. And I've been up to the new tower as well. And it's kind of scary, is the security that good these days, to really prevent something like this from happening again? Could you imagine 10 years from now something happening again in New York City?
That'd be crazy. What do we have better preventative measures set up now, or there's not really nothing we could do about it?
I mean, I think there's probably more people like listening, like Chatterbox, there's probably on the social media. I think that a lot of times, even out here in Vegas, when someone wants to hire someone to kill somebody, like they wind up hiring a cop, like an undercover cop, like
Yeah.
So recently just happened recently in Las Vegas where someone wanted to kill somebody. They hired an undercover cop, basically to kill somebody. So I think probably the intel, listening to the phone lines or going on social media. But these days, what does concern me, there's so many different apps. There's so many different things out there with technology that there's so many ways of hiding information.
Getting around the system,
Do you remember on HBO there was The Wire?
Yeah.
Okay. I always thought The Wire was very interesting. Do you remember how that you knew where the drug deal was going to take place? Do you remember how?
No, I don't remember.
What they would do is they would take a picture of a clock and they would send the photo of the clock. And the clock would say 1:35. But 1:35 was a map. The time.
Like code.
It was a code, basically where in the map to meet. So page 1, column 35 was the spot.
Yeah.
So they used to send photos of a clock. And then the cops did what the hell, what's going on?
Yeah.
They didn't affiliate it to a map of where the location of the drug deal would take place. So these days, can you imagine this apps or these games or there's so much out there.
Yeah.
If you want to hide something, I mean, it can be done.
Oh yeah.
So it does make me nervous for the future with technology, especially this week too as well. MGM Properties last 2 days.
I heard they got
terrorist. Someone said that they paid $30 million. I don't know if that's true, but basically, there was a hacker.
Yeah.
Whether terrorist, Russia, who knows what, right?
Yeah.
Someone stated the rumor was that they paid $30 million to get the system back.
Yeah, I heard
So
that.
I don't know if this is true too.
I know they lost a lot of money while it was down.
And
it was
also
multiple casinos, wasn't it?
I think it's all the MGM properties.
Yeah.
And remember these days with digital, you can't get into your hotel room if the key thing is down.
Oh, shit.
So there's a lot of different issues with that. And by the way, 2 weeks ago there was a major hacking convention in Vegas, where basically.
Oh wow.
So who knows where it comes from, right? Imagine if it's some Russian person, that's trying to hack into Vegas.
So don't go to those conventions because they will legit, if you go there and you don't put your phone in a bag that's safe from that, they will just hack your phone.
Wow.
Because it's the fun thing to do over there.
But that's crazy. Y'all have that meeting over here, and then 2 weeks later, the casinos get hacked.
I do think it's a little weird.
Yeah,
what timing wise? It's not like 2 months or 2 years. It's 2 weeks ago.
That's kind of a unique coincidence, I guess.
But we definitely live in crazy times. So
to lighten the mood a little bit, right? You being from New York, if Brooklyn PD fought Boston PD, who wins?
It's interesting. Both these, the East Coast police departments are probably very strong.
Yeah.
In general, so I don't know. But these days, things are changing with policing, as you could tell, and with Facebook, social media, you can see that when you go to New York City, I'm sure Boston's like this. I haven't really seen the Boston, but it seems like things are off the hook again. I mean, at least when I was a cop, there was more law and order. Right now, anything goes. People are stealing. You see all these videos of New York City. What is going on? Even Hollywood, California, LA, Oregon, Washington State.
I heard New York was doing the same thing California was doing as far as not arresting people for stealing.
I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts with that? What's your take on this whole?
I wouldn't be personally surprised if it wasn't a land grab. If the government doesn't want the businesses to go out of business and fail, or insurance rates to hike up, and then they just come in and buy everything. That something like that wouldn't surprise me. And then Amazon's growing, so in the future everything's just going to be delivered anyway. So maybe they're doing away with brick and mortar businesses. It's a lot of conspiracies behind that. So
I guess as a good person, I just sometimes I can't believe that even with Maui, they're saying that they started the fires just because they wanted the land.
Electric company.
I mean, what are you saying? You kill all these people? I mean, is there some evil person in a movie basically just trying to get Maui, Lahana, basically to take over that land? Yeah. I mean, it sounds crazy. Is it possible? Anything's possible.
Yeah.
But I mean, in New York City, all these states, and people say Democrats, Republicans. I mean, personally, I've always voted who I thought was a good person to be in office. I wasn't,
Yeah.
But to me personally, people say, well, Democrats want this. I don't understand why anybody would want this in any society. Why is it some people would say, okay, from the lower socioeconomic groups,
Yeah.
the people that steal, like whether you're in a black community or white community, whether it's poorer the section, they're more likely to steal for survival, right?
Right.
And then they get incarcerated, they go to jail, they go to prison, right? It's affecting, you know, the future, in general. But it just seems like so many people going out now to steal. And then the police just don't even care anymore because basically the district attorney's office doesn't want to follow through.
Right.
So the question really comes down to is like, you know, it's like, what are the police doing? What are people, do people not care anymore? Like, it's still society. I mean, these places are closing up, like Beverly Hills,
Right.
or any city, right?
Right.
They're closing up their shops. And the thing that helps us the most actually is Amazon, right?
Right.
Because Amazon wants your business. It's safer just to click a button, press send, and you don't have to leave your house.
Yeah.
And even the malls are closing down. All the malls that had shops, right? They were like empty. They're trying to repurpose
You know they're
malls.
about to do the mask mandates all over again. There's buzz of that and all this. So
I know, like, definitely the COVID thing, even like some coworkers, you know, have picked up COVID again in general, but like, it's more like the flu, but people saying, all right, stay home and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely live in a crazy world now. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I have 3 kids
Yeah.
right next door, you know, like, you don't know what the future's going to be. And it makes me nervous of society where these days it's kind of just like anything goes. I think these days you have to carrying a firearm
Yeah.
just to protect you and your family. I think you have to be prepared more and make your home a little bit more of a, to secure your home more, to make sure that you're safe. I just think anything can happen these days and you got to be so careful. So I don't know what people are thinking, but like I said, I definitely don't think things are safer.
Yeah.
And New York City, you know, as a big city, definitely went backwards, which I'm surprised because it happens to be a black mayor who was a police sergeant, you know, if even a lieutenant at one time. Like, I just, if you look at the city, like, it's not safer.
No.
So if you go to Washington or these different states, hopefully Las Vegas, I mean, it is a small town that the Las Vegas Metro Police specifically, which is the major law enforcement, that really, you know, stops this from happening. The other day I happened to be in like a Marshall's. There was a Metro cop inside. And in my mind, I was thinking I'm just waiting for this guy, this one Metro cop, waiting for like 20 people to run into, you know, start robbing the place, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can't just start like shooting people, you know?
Right.
But in my mind, I mean, like, that's the society we live in, that we have to have law enforcement standing on the inside now instead of loss prevention, because loss prevention is not allowed to do anything because it's not worth the
Yeah.
cost of the liability of a lawsuit from lawyers. Talk about justice,
Yeah.
having lawyers basically sue these different entities for when people get hurt.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So if
You're the guru these days of Justice Junkeez.
if you held a high political position, how would you change the country for the better of your children's futures? Or would you just tell them, hey, look, we can't control what happens, be ready to adjust? Like, what's your...
You know, the one thing I would say is this: as a kid, when I grew up in New York City, when Rudy Giuliani, who's going through all this stuff with Trump these days, when Rudy Giuliani was basically doing his thing in New York City, Times Square and New York became safer, and he believed to deal with the quality of life issues. And in New York City, there was 3 types of tickets you can give out. There was an A ticket, A summons, a B summons, and a C summons. An A summons was basically a moving violation. A B summons was like a parking ticket, and a C summons was a quality of life ticket. So if you're drinking in public, if you were urinating in public. And what they did was they started this unit called the Tracer Unit in New York City. And I was actually very happy that I wasn't part of the unit because it wasn't something I wanted to do. And maybe I was young, I was a little more intimidated as well. Like, you basically jump out of a van. There's a bunch of people, whether they're gambling or they're urinating, or who knows what they're doing. And you basically kind of attacking the problem right away. And you start giving everyone tickets. You run everyone for warrants. And you're basically taking people off the street. But the people that were urinating in public or gambling were the ones that had a murder warrant.
Yeah.
So the goal was to basically attack, like kind of like cockroaches. You know, basically attacking the cockroaches, and basically from there you're pulling them out and you're taking the bad ones. But the thing with it is, right, people don't like that, right? People don't want to be stopped. They don't want to be searched. I'm being harassed. I'm black. I'm white. I'm purple, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with it is in the lower socioeconomic areas, whether white or black, because there's housing projects that had, you know, tons of white people, tons of black people, tons of Hispanic people. People don't want to be stopped by the police.
Right.
But when you have a housing project that's 60 flights long and so many people living there, it's hard to police it, the housing projects. So that's another issue, housing, you know, how things were set up back in the day.
Right.
But all I'm saying is that I think you have to be a little bit tougher on crime. Giuliani, I think, did a good job in New York City. If you went to Times Square and quality of life issues, people were taken off the street. Being soft on crime or defunding the police, you could add more mental health people, more mental health social workers. You can do more things, but getting rid of the police is not going to help the problem. You have to be tough on crime. Even if we lived in the woods right now, you need some type of law and order. Someone's going to have to police. You know, if we have a village, right? Otherwise, people are going to rape and and basically hurt people and steal and so on. Someone has to create law and order. And if you don't have police officers out there, then who's doing it?
Right. Okay, so if you got into a high political position, what would you do about the immigration problem in New York? Because there's a lot of people over there committing crimes with no ID, no way to trace them. What do you think a solution would be?
You know, if you look at other countries, they would not allow you. If we went to Italy right now, right, and you went to cross the board and say, I want to live here, they would not allow that to happen. Other countries don't allow that to happen. I don't know why. Now, we could say America's the land of the free, right?
Right.
And yeah, I get that part of it, but we can't let everybody in, right? Because it costs a lot of money. We're going to go bankrupt the whole country. And so there has to be some type of easy way of doing it. And I'm not sure if you know this, but you know, with Ukrainians that are escaping Ukraine because of the war, if 5,000 Ukrainians came, what they do with the 5,000 Ukrainians, they'll split it up to all the states. Let's say 100 here, 100 there, 100 there, 100 to New York, 100 to DC. They'll split it up. So that at least it doesn't affect the whole society, right? Because now you got 100 people that need jobs.
Right.
You got 100 people that are going to be on welfare, right, until they get started. 100 people that need cars. 100 people that need, you know, unemployment, right? They need money or they need housing. If you put 5,000 people in one area, like in New York City, like they're doing, people are sleeping outside, you know, churches, and you know, there's no place for them to stay.
Yeah.
They're in New York City. They're trying to get people like Airbnb, or they're trying to use the hotel rooms, like mandate the hotels to give up, you know, their room for a person that, you know, is not an immigrant or homeless even. So that becomes the whole issue in regards to business. But, you know, I feel bad for people if they're escaping a country that where they're being tortured or they're from Haiti and so on. So I go both ways. But I mean, you have to, you know, you have to maintain civilization.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, you see what's happening right now is that basically people are sleeping on the floors. There's theft that's taking place, or basically there's an increase now in taxes that people are paying for it.
Yeah.
So it's not, there's no, you know, easy answer, but I think for sure you still need to be, you know, when I say tough,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to say above average on crime, you know, I don't know how else you put it.
Yeah.
You still have to maintain law and order no matter what state, what city, what country on planet Earth. You have to have law and order.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people take control. They'll take advantage of people, and people will be affected by it financially, you know, bodily injury, sexual assaults, females. I mean, if there's no law and order, I mean, look what happens in other countries.
Yeah.
So definitely law and order is, and immigration, definitely having a policy. It doesn't have to be so strict, but it has to be some type of above average policy to maintain the law and order specifically. It all goes back to law and order.
Yeah. Okay. So what was your expectations of being a police officer before you went in versus what you see now? How did it change?
That's a good question. You know, I just think that it's okay. One of the biggest things I think for New York City, I happened to go to a precinct in Brooklyn North where I just got sent. Maybe they felt I lived in Queens. They looked where I lived, and they said, you know, this guy's not too far away. Like, you know, we're not, you know, they try to maybe place people different ways. The problem is, I think that police officers, like every year or 2 years, need to be moved around. Okay. Some cops stay in one precinct for 20 years of their career. Yeah. I happen to be in a very, very bad area, but the truth is 5% of the people were the ones that were bad. 95% of the people are good people. But as police officers, you're really dealing with the 5% that are bad people. Right? People calling 911 or people that are victims. So I actually think that even with my short period of time being in Brooklyn, you know, 3 years and 9 months in New York City, people get very tainted and very negative. So even I had a partner where, you know, you get upset that, you know, of your day, of your job, as a police officer, if someone was waving once, like, hey, like I need the police, and my partner was driving and say, hey, like pull over, you know, and he's like, nah, he's just waving to the police. Now, is it possible he was waving that day? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was waving. Personally, I think he needs some help.
Still want to pull over and see, right?
So I said, look, if I'm dressing up as Superman, I need to go out and check on what's going on. Like, it is what it is. I understand this area is not the best. Some people would say, hey, just take food and drugs and just helicopter it in and just drop it off. Let them fend for themselves. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, this is a problem from the police department's administration where they need to move people around, right? Like a cop could be in a bad area, then could be in a good area, then move around. Move the cops around a little bit so that they're not, I mean, it actually could prevent corruption, right? Because you're mixing people all around all the time. Yeah. And then the other thing is that you're giving a different perspective of different people's lives, right? It could be in a Chinese neighborhood, because in New York City, most of the areas are not fully diversified. They're somewhat segregated. So The bottom line is that if you move people around, the officers, right? They know about different cultures, different languages, different people, different experiences. I think that's good. But when you stick a police officer for 20 years, and I'll just say in a white community, and he's a black officer, and maybe the white officers are really negative to him because he's black or white. I mean, these things still take place, right, in our society. Maybe they just don't like cops at all. I think changing it up and mixing it up a little bit is just better in general. And that's one thing they don't do, which they should be doing.
Okay, so what advice?
And that's all police departments all over. LA, Hollywood, Beverly Hills. They should be changing up the different areas.
Okay. What advice do you have for someone who wants to be a police officer? What would you, because you survived the streets out there, you stayed alive. What advice do you have to give the young people who want to do this? Give them advice to help them stay alive.
You know, staying alive is one thing, but what I really tell, like I wouldn't tell my kid to become a police officer.
Yeah.
Now, these days, there's cameras on everybody, which is great. I do believe it helps the community and it also helps the police officers. But the one thing I share with people is, could you imagine whatever your job is all day long, whether you go to the bathroom, you eat, whatever it is, you have a camera on all day long. But people would say, even administrators, they would say, hey, if you're a good cop, what's the big deal? The problems with cameras is if you read the police procedure manual, whatever police department you're with, you could be breaking that policy all day long. If I sit in this chair for 5 minutes and I'm not moving, you could discipline me for failure to do my job, that I wasn't moving the patrol car for 5 minutes. So the problem is that there's a lot of times there's issues with administration, or people don't like you, things that happen wherever you are. So I don't know if I wouldn't tell my son to be a police officer because I just think it's a very difficult job. Also, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. Yeah. The few officers that, and even in Henderson where I worked, I did community policing for about 6-7 years where I taught the DARE program. I did neighborhood watch programs. A few of the officers that I worked with for different reasons at the end, one basically committed suicide. One overdosed on prescription pills that he was picking up at the different stations that you were supposed to remove them from the community. But for some reason, maybe he had an addiction problem and he took them and basically used them to overdose, killed himself. Another officer worked many years. After he retired, maybe I think it was like a year later, he died. So there's a lot of stress that people don't see. Even in Henderson, which is a great department, it's more, upscale and a better police department. I served 13 years there. It is a great place, especially compared to NYPD where I was in Brooklyn. So the thing with it is stress. People don't realize that a police officer is wearing a piece of cloth that's blue or, brown, and he's wearing a metal badge, right, which is nothing, of no value, really, the value that you place on basically, law and order and justice. Right. But, people think like, they're a higher standard. They're supposed to be a high standard, but if you lost your mom or someone dies in the family, you go out and you drink. Right. Or something happens to you, you can change that day. And I had somebody that their mother died and they went out drinking. They were so upset. They drove on the 15 the wrong way. He had his gun with him. He wound up getting arrested. He lost his job. Things went south for him. And, policing is a calling, I feel, but the truth is there's a lot of things that can affect people. Even myself, I am not perfect. I've never been a perfect person. I've made mistakes as well. But the truth is, I'm fortunate to survive 17 years, whether it's from politics or policing or from working with certain people. I had great experiences, great stories, helped a lot of people. But just to be alive and to collect a police pension, I mean, I'm actually lucky. Yeah. Like I said, to the few people that I've worked with that are no longer here, I'm actually a fortunate survivor. And I worked 9/11 as well. So I am, knock on wood, fortunate to be alive today. And like I said, I mean, I worked in one of the worst areas in New York City. Yeah. Henderson was a great place. Definitely a better area to work for policing. And but again, doesn't matter, where you work. There's crime and issues wherever you work, whatever job you have as well.
Okay. Is there any situations that you wouldn't mind talking about that mentally broke you down during the job? I mean, you've been doing it for 17 years. Like, was there any point where you just mentally fucking broke down?
There was one time, it's interesting. I was just thinking about, the times. It's actually interesting. The one time that I actually broke down, which is where you think maybe it was 9/11 or something like that. I was in Brooklyn, and when I became a police officer, when you first start out, you have to actually walk a foot post. So I'm walking around a foot post, and the main area in Brooklyn where I worked is called Rockaway and Livonia. These are just cross streets. It was very, very cold out. I'm on a foot post, and I'm actually inside a subway station. There's like an old room inside the subway station where you can go to take a break, have some lunch, something like. But it's like an older room. Who knows if there's asbestos? Like really old school. Probably 1950 was built.
Yeah.
So I go inside the room, and basically I think I'm by myself that day. Sometimes, like let's say we're partners for the day on foot when you're in the beginning, and they pull you off. They're like, hey, we need you to watch this guy at the hospital. So I'm by myself. It's a cold, rainy day, and I literally was inside the room. And was I hiding? Like, if no one was on the street. I'm tired. You're walking around on a footbeat. Where am I going to go? I'm in the ghetto.
Yeah.
I can't I'm not going to the housing project to visit someone, right?
Yeah.
There's no store that's open. It's freezing cold. It's raining. And I remember sitting inside the room, and I started crying. And I said to myself, "There's got to be something better. Like, I can't believe I did all this to become a New York City police officer, and I'm sitting in this room. It's freezing cold. I'm like bored. I'm alone. I'm tired. And my shift was 6 at night till 2 in the morning. I was off Tuesdays and Wednesdays when I first started. But when you're in the beginning, it's like." It's probably the worst time in the beginning. Eventually you get a partner, you go to a patrol car, things get easier.
Yeah.
Like you're with somebody. I just remember being lonely, tired, cold. I felt like a glorified homeless person with a badge and gun.
Yeah.
And even though technically I'm supposed to be out there looking for crime on foot, it's still an 8-hour day. You're tired on foot. Imagine walking around for 8 hours with a gun belt and badge, right? And like I'm looking for crime and I'm by myself. I'm 23 years old, right? Like I'm walking around like, in the middle of the ghetto. So like it definitely broke me down where I said, you know what? I need to apply for other jobs. I need to go to a better place. I was in like the worst. And I used to be upset because there were guys that were where I lived was called the 111 precinct. The 111 was beautiful. Like if I was in the 111, I was on a foot post. I would go into Dunkin' Donuts. I would go to White Castle. I would go into a diner, right, to take a break. But I was in a place that everything was closed because it was a hardcore area to work in.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's still a hardcore area,
Yeah.
So the truth is I did break down that day and I was like, you know what? I got to apply for other jobs. I got to get the hell out of here. This is not what I signed up for. So 1 or 2 times I got shot out another time too during, I think it was July 4th. And I was like on the top of a housing roof and I was crawling on the gravel of a housing rooftop. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm making like $600 every 2 weeks. I'm being shot at.
Yeah.
It's freezing cold. Like, what am I doing here? So I started taking all these different police exams by choice just to get out of this. So like I said, I mean, I did get called for New York State Trooper. I called for Henderson Police, Las Vegas Metro, Connecticut. It was Stamford, Connecticut Police I got called for. So I got called, but the question is, when do you make that move? Do you have to go through another police academy? I did go through another police academy out here in Henderson.
Yeah.
So I've actually been through 3 agencies, 2 police academies. By choice, I made those moves to be a better quality of life. And the truth is, I did push myself, even when people said, Dave, you're a lifer. You're not going anywhere. I used to have the Las Vegas, like a moving book, relocation guide.
Yeah.
And I remember it was folded up in my back pocket. It was like beautiful palm trees, beautiful new homes. And I would take that to the patrol car and I would look through the Las Vegas magazine. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I got to get out of here. This looks beautiful out there, So I pushed myself and basically, fortunately I'm here 21 years in Vegas and I'm very, very fortunate. But like I said, I definitely remember the day that I was crying, in full uniform, saying to myself, like, what am I doing? Like, what, for what?
Yeah. Okay. So Austin's kind of wrapping us up. I've got 2 more questions.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry if I'm rambling too much.
No.
You're bringing me back.
No, you. So can
That's
you?
what the Justice Junkeez does. It breaking people down, breaking people.
Can you also describe the trauma that the job also has on the family? Because I know it's probably not hard. Maybe sometimes your phone dies and you come home from work late. They don't know where you are. It's like they don't know if they're going to see you tomorrow. Anything you could elaborate on? Because I know it's got to be tough on the family as well.
There were times when I was on the phone with my wife and I'm like, look, I got to go. Something major's going down. I hear something, I'll call you back. Where I'm grabbing my rifle and I'm doing something and I didn't call her back for a few hours because basically we're like surrounding a location where like it was a suicide suspect or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't call back for a few hours. So I know she was calling my mom and dad and saying, hey, is he okay? Is he okay? They didn't hear from me, and I didn't think anything of it at the time, but they were definitely stressed, right? They didn't know what happened. I could have got shot, killed, something would have happened. So a lot of those times, looking back, maybe I should have called right away. Texting was still a feature, even 10, 15 years ago, but I think those times they were nervous if you asked my wife about those things. But
no time you came home and the kids were crying, happy to see you, hugged your leg.
The one thing was different, actually. So one thing that was fortunate about me, I retired when we just had my first kid.
Okay.
So I am fortunate that because I didn't have, like, my kids are not affected by that. But I was very fortunate because I did work most of my time day shift, and I was working community policing. I was off like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I had a better shift, better schedule. But most of the times, if you wanted to become a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, you wanted to move up the ranks, which I wanted to do, at different times, you have to change your shift. You have to go to swing shift. You have to go to graveyard.
Yeah.
And the problem is I was trying to basically be like a cop on banker hours.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to affect my life. And that does affect people. Now, some people love it. They work from 2 to midnight. They enjoy policing. They come home. They're with the kids in the morning. They drive them to school. But to me, I felt when I worked that 2 o'clock shift, I felt like you wake up, it was like a wasted day.
Yeah.
And then you slept the day. If you got home at midnight, you slept to maybe 10 in the morning. You had a few hour window, right? Haircut, go get lunch, and you go back to work. So I kind of felt you wasted the day where if you got home maybe at 4 or 5 o'clock, you still had the nighttime. It was more of a normal shift.
Yeah.
Or even if you went to sleep at 11, 12, you were able to kind of make it through. So I actually, for me, fortunate of the shift, but I agree, a lot of cops, they have the rotating shifts. There were some cops that used to say that would die earlier because they would do 2 weeks of swing, 1 week of grave, 1 week of day shift. They would rotate the shift back in the day.
Yeah.
They said that caused health problems because of the sleeping pattern and so on. So long story short, it's not good, the schedule. Some people like the graveyard shift.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is I was very fortunate personally about that. My kids, I just had my kids when I retired. So I was 39 when I retired, and I started when I was 22. So I'm actually glad for my kids' sake that they didn't have to see that. I still have my police uniforms. They see it all. They see the pictures and so on, and they know that I was a cop. But basically, I'm just glad that they didn't have to experience that.
Yeah.
And
You shielded them from a lot.
It seems cool, and it is a fun job, and it's cool. But in the long run, it's still a job. It's still work. But, I'm glad I served my time. I help people. I do believe that I did get justice for people. I enjoyed basically, law and order in that regards. Tough job, not easy, but I'm glad I'm retired. I'm glad that I'm out of it and basically that I survived it.
Okay. Last question.
Go for it.
How do we improve mental health for police and their families?
That's a good one. I mean, they always talk about different training and seminars. I don't know. That's a tough one. The one story that I have, which is really like a crazy story, is one of the guys I work with, I was mentioning in community policing. He was the mental health coordinator for the police.
The guy who committed suicide was the
guy that actually committed suicide. And he was a great, honestly, I don't really know what happened to this day.
Yeah.
But the guy basically shot himself, killed himself while working.
Yeah.
He was a thin guy, good thin guy. He was military. He was a black belt with karate.
Yeah.
He was married, had some kids. I'm sure like any family, right? Ups and downs, like whatever family, married, kids, whatever. But basically he was they call him the PEEP officer, which is like the employee assistance, police officer that would check, like if something happened or they saw a dead body or someone died, you would get with all the officers and talk to them individually. But no one ever checked on that guy. And probably family, I don't think there was anything, sometimes things happen in the police world. I don't think he was like involved in some type of crime.
Is there any programs for family members of police officers?
They had actually female, the wives of those officers, they had a group like for mental health and getting people together. So they try all these places. Maybe some places are better than others. Maybe there's a newer program. But the crazy thing is, at least where I worked, is that guy committed suicide. God rest his soul. He was a great guy, and a really, really nice guy. And I don't even know the story today. Police departments, probably just covered up a little bit. They don't want to talk about it. Yeah. Just like the guy that, overdosed on the drugs. No one really talked about it. You can Google it. It's a real story. The guy, good guy, military, whatever, but things happen to weird people, weird times. That's what I'm saying. I'm fortunate that I made it through. Even good people, even great officers. Even if there's anyone that's listening out there, they know me and they think, oh, I was a bad cop. I'm alive. You know what I'm saying? And these days, I mean, I went out there just like every other cop. I am not perfect. I made mistakes. Whether on uniform or off the uniform, I'm not a perfect person. Nobody is. But the bottom line is, I survived it. I'm done with it. I do like helping people. I've always enjoyed helping people. My phone to this day, the problem solver, is 24/7. Someone called me at 4:15 last night, 4:15 in the morning, to ask me about a traffic ticket that they submitted to one of the lawyers that I work with. They called me at 4:15 morning like it was no big deal. I answered like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to get an update on my ticket. What happened? I said, no problem. I'll let the attorney know to give you a call. I'm in the bathroom. Like, what is this? It's 4:15 in the morning, and they're talking as if like they were going to get someone,
Yeah.
So, I answered the phone, and I said, look, I'll make sure I'll let them know to call you, So I enjoy helping people. The bottom line it is what it is. Now I'm just doing it as the problem solver, as a retired police officer, have the weekly podcast of the problem solver. A lot of clips that are out there. I tell people to help people. People do find me. And, I do work, like I said, for a law firm. And my goal is to help people there as well that are, involved in accidents and injured. And these days, just like Justice Junkeez, my goal is really, I've always said this, is to get people justice.
Yeah.
And justice means whether you can be compensated for pain and suffering, or it can mean basically getting them justice where the other person goes to jail. We've had someone hit and run, military guy. We used Crime Stopper, money from the law firm to basically find out who killed this person on a hit and run. The tip came in. The law firm basically provided the money, reward money. It was $10,000. At the end, they got the tip. They went into the person happened to be in jail for domestic battery. They go to the jail. The guy basically admits, hey, I did a hit and run. I don't know how it happened. He got convicted for maybe 2 to 4 years. It was like hit and run felony. But meanwhile, he stole a car. So was there justice? I mean, luckily the guy's serving, let's say, 2 to 4 years with, probation or something like that. But I don't know. It seemed like there should be a lot more jail time, and whether the DA's office was really on top of their game or who knows what. Okay. But the law firm I worked with actually helped, with the burial. And it wasn't even, the law firm I worked with, the Hadari Law Group, was not even like, it wasn't the client. It was just a random person that we knew about, and we helped to get justice by even paying for the funeral services just to help that family that didn't have money. Yeah. So Samurai and Hadari is basically, with Hadari Law Group, was the lawyer that came through to help that family provide tip money to get justice, and at the same time to basically provide money for the burial of this, it was a veteran, 23-year-old guy with a kid. So, it's great that there's some lawyers out there like Sam Hadari who basically want to help people get justice, one way or the other, whether it's providing money for the funeral or for Crime Stopper money to basically get justice for people. So, I'm trying to do my thing and basically help, with law and order and with justice now, without the badge, behind the microphone.
Okay. So I heard Austin was rear-ended recently. Can he still use a butt plug with a bruised tailbone? I'm just kidding.
It's very possible. If he thinks he can handle that, it may actually help him with his back injury, as well. So, you never know. So, but thanks for having me on the show, Justice Junkeez.
I appreciate it.
As usual, I'm definitely a fan of yours as well. I know that you like to be talk about these controversial topics, which is good. People need to talk about these topics, so it's good because that's how you make change happen, by talking about it and understanding it. And I'm sure from the few times that we've been on the shows together, you can get a different perspective where you don't always see. And no one's perfect, no matter where you are in society. But the goal is to keep doing positive stuff and keep moving forward.
Okay. Yes, sir. All right. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Tune in for more. We got more on the way.